Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Tales of Tigrosa. I'm your host, Sydney Foltz, recording this podcast from my beautiful home in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And I don't know if you can hear right now, but we got a little rain going on. So if you hear some trickles in the background, Mama Earth is cleansing these beautiful lands. So in today's episode, I wanted to dive into the entirety of my journey with exploring and embodying the Akashic Records. So for those who don't know, I'm an Akashic Record reader. It's one of the modalities I work with in my work. I have officially been reading for the Akashic Records for about a year now, but I've been psychic channeling in my work for the last 4 years, including tapping into the Akashic Records for my own support and my own guidance. And let me tell you, the Akashic Records have completely elevated my life in the most magical ways. And so it just inspired me to dive in today and just share all of the magic that they've brought me into my life, you know, from my very first reading in 2020 to me tapping into the records myself, my very first time being brought into the Akashic Records, how I've elevated my training, how it's expanded my own ability to take massive, expansive leaps for my life, and how it's served the people who come and receive these readings from me. So yeah, I'm really excited to get right into it. So first I'm going to explain what is the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records is the living library of everything that ever has been, is, and could be since the birth of your soul's existence. Everything on this planet has an Akashic Record. Rocks have an Akashic Record. Crystals, bicycles, animals, pets, plants, things, objects, places, people, everyone's got it, right? And it is this incredible source of all of the information that has ever existed since the start of your energy, or that thing's energy, or that person's energy, or the energy of a place. And it's really beautiful because the Akashic Records are really here to serve as a gateway for deeper understanding of our lives. They're here to give us loving guidance to lead us towards our soul's potential. And they're here to really reveal clarity within our lives. You know, sometimes we can get stuck in certain patterns. Sometimes we can feel unclear about certain situations we're in, or maybe unclear about relationships, or unclear about jobs, where to move, things like that. And the Akashic Records are really here to lift the veil of confusion and give you that supportive, divine, loving guidance to lead you on the path towards your soul's greatest potential. And the Akashic Records are really here to open up a door of expansion for your life, to really help you align with the infinite possibilities that are here for you. Because here's the thing, we go around in society, we're told certain things, you know, we're caught in certain systems, caught in certain pathways, and we create these conditions and limitations in our mind that keep us from stepping fully into our power. But the Akashic Records sees the potential of all. It sees where you're going. It sees the possibility and potential for your life. It sees what you're capable of creating. It knows what your soul wants to create. And it's here to provide the loving support and guidance to guide you further on that path and break free of certain patterns and resistances that might be holding you back from taking that inspired action. They're really great for gaining clarity on certain soul contracts in this life, relationships, life situations you may be in, maybe a job you're working, you know, career path, where to move, where to travel, things like that. But what's really beautiful about the Akashic Records is that they honor your sovereignty, and they see that where you are is divinely perfect. It's exactly where you're meant to be, and they will never tell you what to do, yet they will provide loving, supportive guidance, suggestions, and invitations to help you break free from resistances and move you further towards the path of welcoming in the infinite potential and possibilities for your life. What's really beautiful about the records, and this is what makes them different than traditional psychic medium readings, is that they will never predict destined timelines. So a lot of times you go and see psychics and, you know, they'll tell you, oh, you're going to have 3 kids and get married on this date and die on that date and, you know, all these things. which sure, maybe that's hanging around in the field because it either is true or it once was true. But the thing is, there is no psychic or reader on this planet that can ever 100% accurately predict something. And this is very important to remember because things are always changing. Timelines are always changing. You've got your own choices that you make in life. The people around you make choices in life. The world makes choices in your life. Soul contracts change. Everything's happening at once. And it's absolutely impossible to 100% predict something's going to happen. Now, what the records can sometimes do is provide likely timelines or likely predictions based on your current momentum or based on the guidance that they are giving to say if you were to embody it or follow it. But what's really beautiful is that they really honor the possibility of infinite possibilities for timelines, infinite possibilities for your life. Like there are no hard no's in the Akashic Records, which is what makes them so beautiful. Now, another thing I'll point out since we're on the topic of other readers is, when I'm channeling the Akashic Records, I am, channeling from a space of completely neutrality. My personality is completely removed from the situation. Now, of course, I am using my voice to relay the information. So, the tone and texture and flavors of my voice will come out in the reading. But I am ensuring that what I'm channeling is exactly the most supportive information and guidance that you are meant to receive in this moment, coming directly from the records. I've seen a lot of psychic readings in my life, or psychic readers in my life, and I've heard this from a lot of people. And sometimes, readers can get caught up in their own egos and their own projections. So sometimes the advice that comes through may not be coming from that divine higher guidance, but may be coming from their own lived perception or their own ego or their own projections, or maybe something else that is going on in your life. So it's just something to be really mindful about when it comes to picking a reader and going to someone for this guidance. But usually in the Akashic Records, and especially the way I was trained, which I'll get into in a little bit, is that you learn to completely separate your ego and separate yourself from the reading and completely tune in to the piece of guidance that is meant for you at that time. And I just have to say, the Akashic Records have just changed my life in the most magical ways. I mean, to be able to have this tool of being able to channel, to being able to rise above my own limitations and resistances and be able to access this library of living information and potential for my soul, it's allowed me to take incredible leaps for my life that probably would have taken me an even longer time, or maybe I would have quite had the trust to take these big leaps if it wasn't for the guidance and support of the records. It's helped me break free from certain patterns and resistances. It always, always, always brings me back to love, brings me back to inner safety, brings me back to trust, and brings me back to faith in myself, faith in life, faith in God, and trust that everything is unfolding so beautifully for my life. And so with that, I want to now talk about the very first Akashic Record reading I ever got. So this was December of 2020. This was about a month before I was leaving Chicago and moving my life to Costa Rica. And it was a deeply profound experience. At this point, I had seen a psychic medium maybe a few years before this moment who did channel a lot of really impactful information for me. But this was my first Akashic Record reading. And this reader was good. She predicted a lot. Like, she tapped into my field and was already seeing like jungle energy, which made sense because I was moving to Costa Rica. And she shared a lot of really powerful, relevant information for me. But the one that she shared that was completely unexpected was that she opened the reading and said, before you even ask your questions, this is the message that came through. And she talked about how I have been a team player my whole life. All of the jobs I've worked, all of the projects I've worked on, I've always been a key member. I've worked really, really hard, supporting others, often picking up the slack for everyone. And I was always considered a very valuable team member. And she, highlighted how much fulfillment I would get off of this by being a part of a team and, putting in work and being of service, whether it was like bartending or acting, being in a play or a production or a podcast, things like that. I always showed up 110%. And the records were, acknowledging this beautiful, hardworking aspect of me. And they said, if you want, now is the time to really put this hard work and efforts that I've put into other people's projects into my own projects and create something for myself. Which was really cool to receive, because basically they were like, hey, you're done working for other people. It's time for you to be your own boss and like really create something for yourself. And they were highlighting that the fulfillment that you get from being a part of a team and working and being a part of other people's projects, you're going to get that and receive that from so much more by creating something for yourself. And eventually you'll find your team, you'll gather up the people, and you'll build something incredible. And at the time, I was just completely resetting my life. And I was like, well, that sounds great, but I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that looks like. But I always kept it in my heart and I always kept it in my mind, because it really resonated within my soul of, yeah, it is time for me to create something for myself. So 4 months after that reading, I was a few months into my Costa Rica journey. And I mentioned this in my first episode when I explained my story, but I somehow found myself in an ayahuasca vision quest. And, ever since this Akashic record reading, I was really, really interested in diving into my own Akashic records. And I remember on the final ceremony, the final night, the final ceremony with ayahuasca, like I had my intention with her. It was kind of a quick journey with her. We kind of purged a little bit, got clarity and insight on the intentions. And then I was just kind of sitting in this nothingness for a while. And I was like, and ayahuasca was like, well, we're kind of done. Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, okay, ayahuasca, like I want to go to the Akashic records. She was like, bet. Kind of. And so she sent me up into the Akashic records. And this was the first time I had ever accessed it myself. And I remember I was standing at the gateway and there were 2 really powerful angel guardians guarding this gateway. And they opened the gates for me and gave me permission to walk through. And I walked through these beautiful gates. And I remember that I walked into this room. Basically, it was like this infinite library full of all of these aisles that went on forever, full of all of these books. And all of these books represented different times of my life, different situations, contracts, places, lifetimes, things like that. And I remember I was like kind of overwhelmed, because I was like, whoa, like this is a pretty big library. And like, I like looked at the guards who were like, they were like all serious and like, doing their job as guardians of this library. And I remember asking them like, hey, like you got a Dewey Decimal System or something? Like, like how do I explore this? They didn't find it funny, but I found it funny. But they basically just shared with me, they were like, just start walking and see which book calls to you. So I was like, okay. So I'm walking down this library and all of a sudden I'm in this aisle and there's a book that's like glowing in this beautiful gold light. And I was like, okay, that's the book that's calling to me. So I go and I open the book and I'm kind of just staring at this book of energy. Have you? This beautiful portal of energy. And ayahuasca goes, stick your head in the book. So I do. So I stick my head in the book. And all of a sudden, I enter this lifetime where it's like prehistoric Earth. And I'm a boulder. I'm a giant rock. The sun is shining, like the terrain of the earth. It just looks like dinosaur times, like prehistoric. Like there's these giant trees and like it's very feral and raw. And it's like kind of deserty, but kind of green. It was very interesting. And at first I was like, okay, like I'm a rock. Like, what is this? And the message I got was like, stay with it, like keep going. And I was like, okay. So I'm there chilling as this rock, chilling as this boulder. And then all of a sudden, this giant red dinosaur comes up in front of me and lays this egg. And throughout this entire vision, throughout this entire lifetime, I'm looking after this egg as a boulder. Like I felt the energy of, oh, like my service right now is to like protect this egg and watch this egg and like nurture this egg until eventually it hatches into a baby dinosaur. And so like, I don't know the hatching period of a dinosaur, but it was like, it was showing me kind of the timeline from when the egg was hatched to when the dinosaur was birthed. And I watched this dinosaur be birthed. And I watched, the mother like take care of this dinosaur, and they kind of hung around me for a little bit just so the dinosaur can kind of get their bearings. But eventually the mama and the baby dinosaur left. And it was a very simple vision, but it was very profound. And I remember the message I personally got from it was, okay, whoa, I've always known that I was meant to be a mother. Like, I nannied for 12 years. I've wanted to be a mother since I was a child. There was never a point in my life where I didn't think I was a mother. And I was like, oh, this must be showing me like the quality of motherhood I've always had within me, even when I was a rock and rocks can't really reproduce and have kids. And ayahuasca was like, yes. And also this is to show you that you have witnessed the evolution of Earth since the beginning of time. Like you've been around this planet many, many times. You've seen the evolution and growth of this planet. And it's like, when I received that message, I remember feeling like, okay, whoa, this is a sign that like, yeah, like I'm not only an older soul on Earth, but also too, like to see the potential and capability of what is possible for this planet and what is possible for myself. So I remember coming out of that vision, as I'm leaving the Akashic Records, I asked them, because traditionally what I learned from the first reading I ever got is that there's a prayer that you need. There's a prayer that you need to open up the Akashic Records. And so I asked them, I was like, I want to come back again, but like, can you give me a certain prayer? Like, how do I come back in? And they like looked at each other and they were like, honey, you don't need a prayer. Like, they didn't say honey, I'm paraphrasing because they were like very serious guards. But they were like, you don't need a prayer. You can create a prayer based off your own intention in your own heart, but just really set an intention to come into the Akashic Records and be very clear and specific as to how you want to enter. They're like, you can come here anytime. Like, you don't need anything. Like, you can literally access this at any time. And I fully believe that to be true for every single human on this earth. So I was like, okay, cool. Thanks, guys. And I left the vision. So when I was now integrating everything that ayahuasca vision quest brought me and everything that ceremony in the Akashic Records brought me, I was so determined to dive deeper into the Akashic Records. And I remember I was kind of doing research on like who I could study from, who I could learn from, how I could go into it myself. And it was really interesting because shortly after that experience, this woman, Daniela Gill, somehow came into my field. Now, Daniela has like, at this point, she probably had like 20 posts on Instagram and like something K followers. I'm not really sure how she got into my field, but I saw her on Instagram and I saw that she was doing an Akashic Record training and I was so interested. But I remember during that time, I was also ready to dive into my studies with breathwork, my year-long training with my breathwork studies and my feminine mystery studies. And I was having a hard time discerning which training I wanted to invest in because both of these modalities had been so crucial on my path. Like the Akashic Records was something so mystical and magical and receiving this guidance, but also breathwork was a huge modality and tool for my healing journey. And I remember I was kind of tuning in and I was like, you know what? I'm feeling really called to invest in the breathwork training. And I remember, so I decided to go into breathwork training, and I decided, while I would do breathwork training, I would just do what the records said and just start going into the Akashic Records by myself. But I remember during that time, I said a prayer to God and I was like, God, if I am meant to do this training with Daniela Gill, I fully trust that it will enter my life and it will come to be, and I will have all the resources necessary to be able to invest in this experience when it is meant for me. in true divine timing. Boom, sent the prayer, went on with my life. So at this point, I was kind of like going into the records myself. Like I would enter a really deep state of meditation, and I would like to envision the library. I felt like the records first had me start working with like the imagery of the library so that it was something that my consciousness could understand. And so I spent all my time, like all my morning practices, just going to the beach or sitting in my meditation space and just accessing the Akashic Records. You know, I would access certain soul contracts. I would go into certain past lifetimes. Like I would tune into the Akashic Records of the lands and be shown like different situations and scenarios of the lands. Like they took me to ancient Egypt, Lemuria, Atlantis, like the lives I had lived there and like the battles that had gone on there. And like even before like human civilization was there, like all of the beings that were going there and interacting there. And it was just like really freaking cool. And I remember too, like if I had ever met someone and I like, you know, had a really deep connection, but maybe it fell through, I would go in and see like what the soul contract was there and maybe what our past lives were there and why they were playing out in this life and how to kind of resolve it and come to peace with it and clean the energy and move forward. And then I started to share my energy healings with the world, and I was noticing in my energy healing. So I started working with shamanic Reiki, and I started, you know, sharing that work with the world and giving healings to others. And I was starting to psychically tune in during these energy healings and see certain blockages that were presented, hear certain messages that wanted to come through, you know, all of that. And so my channel really just started to develop and elevate. Flash forward 3 years later, I am living in Peru, and I got invited to work a small little festival here in town to host a breathwork workshop for my friend. And at this festival, Daniela Gill, who I mentioned earlier, who I found on Instagram, was also hosting a workshop at this festival. And she was hosting a workshop on how to access your own Akashic Records. I couldn't attend the workshop because it was going on the same time as breathwork. But I remember I saw her and I was like, whoa, I know that girl. That's Daniela, who came into my field 3 years ago. So I remember I come up to her and I told her, you know, like, hey girl, like you've been in my field. I almost took your training at one point. Like, nice to meet you. And from that moment on, her and I just became like the best of sisters, the best of friends. And we started spending a lot of time with each other, and we started hanging out a lot. And we really formed this pretty profound sisterhood. And I remember that she had a spot open for one of her retreats, which was learning to access your own Akashic Records. And I accepted this invitation and went on this retreat with her. And wow, it was so beautiful to have the loving support and guidance, to be able to be guided into my own Akashic Records in a whole new way. You know, I learned how to work with her prayer, and I learned how to open up my own Akashic Records in many different ways. And I absolutely fell in love again with this practice. Because at this point I had kind of I wasn't really psychic channeling for myself, and I wasn't really going into my own records with myself. Like I had kind of dropped the practice like a year before this moment. But it was so good to pick it back up again. And I was really seeing like, wow, like the immense amount of love and inner unity and safety and expansion that I felt going into my own records was so profound. And the information that I was channeling for myself and that was coming through was incredible. Like I was learning how to integrate certain plant medicine journeys and channel like the wisdom of the plants. I was, you know, getting clarity on certain aspects of my life, hearing certain things of like little habits that I needed to change, like the music I listened to when I went to the gym, my eating habits, you know, my social habits, things like that, and all things to help support my growth and evolution. And, you know, after this training, like she saw how much I loved it, and she invited me into her 9-month training called Akashic Metamorphosis, and I accepted. And it was, I swear, like these 9 months that I spent training in the Akashic Records was like anything I could have ever imagined. And what was so beautiful about this training was that I not only got to learn deeper how to access the records myself from a deep place of integrity, but I also got to learn how to properly read for others. How to really tap into someone's Akashic records. Like I mentioned earlier in the story, completely removing my ego and personality and being able to channel the exact precise wisdom that's coming from their records that is most supportive for them now in a way that they'll understand. I learned how to filter out, different entities that I'm channeling. What's the records? What's my soul? What's my ego? What's the plants? What's God? What's the angels? Things like that, learning to discern different voices. But also like communicate the information in a way that's really supportive and really empowering. And that again, honors people's sovereignty. This is kind of the best way I can explain it. So in the beginning of this training, she saw how I was catching on to it. And she was like, she gave me the blessing to be able to serve donation-based readings just to get some more practice. And in 7 months, I think I read for over 70 people all around the world, donation-based, reading for different people. And this was just through word of mouth. I was barely advertising any of this. And it was incredible to get to meet people from all over the world and to tap into their Akashic records and to tap into their soul and to see the potential of their soul and the beauty of who they are and like the entirety, their divine design, their divine makeup of who they are, and speak to their potential and, receive the guidance that is coming through to best support them. And yeah, I just started channeling myself. I started channeling for others. And I just felt like my life just expanded and my work expanded and my reach expanded. And it really speaks to the infinite quality that is the Akashic Records, the ever expanding quality that is the records. And what was so nice was like, I barely had to advertise. I barely had to put it out there that I was doing these readings. Like it was just catching on through word of mouth. And to me, like, I believe that, to me, it felt like a sign from God that yes, I was meant to be doing this work. And yes, I was meant to be serving as that temple and as that channel to reveal this information for people, to help them step into their potential. And, I've been officially reading the Akashic Records for over a year now, psychic channeling in my work for 4 years now. But I can say that these Akashic Record readings, I feel like I am providing divine loving guidance from the records to help people step into their own leadership. It really feels like that. It really feels like leadership readings, right? Because we're all ourselves are the greatest leaders our lives could have been. And like taking ownership and leadership of our lives is, ensuring that we're moving forward in love, that we're making decisions out of love, that are anchored in abundance, that are anchored in prosperity and faith and trust, that we're not giving into fear and scarcity, that we're not holding ourselves back, that, we're being those integral leader beings for our lives to help us, step into our potential, because it's true, you guys. I mean, if you've listened to my story, like, we are all capable of more than our minds could ever fathom. And the Akashic Records speaks to this. The Akashic Records speaks to the infinite possibilities that are here for your life. And, I always say, like, if you have a vision on your mind and a dream on your heart, it's there for a reason, because you are completely capable of creating that. But sometimes we get caught in our old patterns and get caught in certain situations or feel stuck in certain areas of life that keep us from moving forward in that, which is okay, right? Because that's all a part of the learning. And the Akashic Records reminds us of this, that where you are is exactly perfect. And there's no such thing as wrong or right or good or bad. It's all divine. But there is an easier pathway towards your potential. And sometimes it might feel edgy. Sometimes it might not feel possible. Sometimes it might feel like, well, how could that be the way? But it brings you back into the space of trust and faith to follow that pathway, to follow that light, and to follow that guidance. And every reading that I give someone is just so unique and so special. And I absolutely love doing it because it's It's a mystery for me too. It's amazing to meet someone and go into their records and see the information and the guidance that wants to come through. So if you're listening to this and you're like, whoa, I am ready to receive information from my Akashic Records, I give Akashic Record readings. You can click the link in the description below and book a reading. It's about an hour long. I suggest you come with 3 to 5 questions on areas of life you desire more clarity or guidance on. Come with an open mind, come with a curious heart, and come ready to receive the Akashic transmission that's here for you today. For those who are looking for more support, more private support on your healing journey, I have one spot available for my 3-month online healing program called Bloom, where we meet once a week for 3 months and we enter a space of ceremony. You can see it as a sacred oasis away from the daily norms of your life, where you just get to dive into your soul and create deeper intimacy with yourself and the divine and awaken your authentic expression and just allow yourself to tap into the higher guidance and wisdom that's here for you, and give yourself a space to release those crunchy, those suppressed, those stagnant emotions that are living within your body, so that you can come into a greater place of wholeness with yourself and create greater levels of peace, purpose, pleasure, and freedom within your life. We work with a blend of breath work, Akashic Records, feminine embodiment mentorship, teachings of the rose, shamanic energy healing. If you're working with plant medicine, medicine integration, you name it, it's here. I'm available for you. It's probably one of my most special offerings, and I fall in love with every single person who says yes to this experience. The transformation that is here for you is truly incredible, and the entire program is curated for you, for your intentions for healing, and for where you're at in your healing journey. So if you're interested, link to apply is in the description. I would love to hop on a call, connect, and see if this journey is meant for you. And if you're interested in Daniela Gill, I'm going to have her on, I think in the next week or two, bring her on for an episode where she'll talk all about her journey of the Akashic Records, what the Akashic Records means to her, and share more information about her training that's coming up. With that, thank you all so much for listening. If you are digging this podcast, if you're digging me, digging my wisdom, I really would appreciate it if you liked, follow, subscribed, whatever platform you're on right now. It gives me some loving support. It also lets you know when new episodes are out. And yeah, it helps this podcast reach as many ears as possible. So thank you all so much for this beautiful journey, and I'll see you next week.